Hi, I'm Kate Majot, and this is my podcast, Warning Signs. Warning Signs, the podcast, is a serial podcast of my audiobooks, released one or two chapters at a time. But listen now, once I finish narrating all the chapters for each of the three books, I'll release them as audiobooks and take down the podcast files for that particular book. Warning Signs is my memoir about intimate partner violence and domestic violence. It reads as though it's a fun romance story, but after each chapter, there's a warning signs chapter that explains the domestic violence as it was occurring. Listen on to learn about how domestic violence happens, to help yourself understand and heal, help a friend, or to prevent it from happening to you and your friends. I'm also a therapist specializing in helping people heal from domestic violence through workshops and individual and group therapy. See my website to learn more in the show notes, and it is www.katemajot.com, which is KATEMAGEAU.com, and find that in the show notes. Warning Signs, Volume 1 by Kate Majot. Writing, design, and cover artwork by Kate Majot. Published by Kate Majot in 2022. Audiobook recorded in 2023. I dedicate this book to New Beginnings and all its participants I've stood alongside in our journeys to not only survive, but thrive. I wrote this book to help people learn the warning signs of intimate partner violence, IPV, and domestic violence, DV. IPV is a subset of DV, as IPV is abuse between intimate partners or spouses, and DV is abuse between any family members. Abuse is one person's intent to exert power and control over another person. It can take the form of physical, sexual, emotional, financial, or psychological acts or threats of violence. For more, see the United Nations webpage on domestic abuse. This is my personal story of enduring abuse and how I eventually left. After each chapter in the story, there's a section called Warning Signs that discusses the warning signs of abuse that I did not see at the time. When I experienced this abuse, I did not know what DV, IPV, or abuse really was, and thus I did not know what I was experiencing or that I needed to leave the relationship. I wrote the warning sign sections after each chapter to help people see the signs in the context of abuse as it occurs. At the end of each volume, there's a list of warning signs for quick retrieval. My hope is that this book can teach people the warning signs so that people can 1. Not enter abusive relationships, 2. Leave if they are in them, 3. Help people notice if someone is in an abusive relationship and then teach them the warning signs so they leave, 4. Help people whose loved ones have experienced abuse understand why. My hope is that this book can teach people the warning signs so that people can 1. Not enter abusive relationships, 2. Leave if they are in them, 3. Help people notice if someone is in an abusive relationship and then teach them the warning signs so they leave, 4. Help people whose loved ones have experienced abuse understand what happened and why it was hard for them to see the signs and leave, and 5. Create a global discussion so that we can change these patterns so as a society we can work toward ending abuse. It is critical that we as a society do something to stop abuse. In the United States, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men will experience DV in their lifetimes, cited from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Authors note this number currently stands at 1 in 3 women. Even if my book helps just one person reach safety sooner than they otherwise might have, I will consider it a success. I spent 7 years writing these books. In those 7 years, I attended a domestic violence advocacy support group where I learned about abuse. Later, I went back as a volunteer to run that support group for 2 years, saw a mental health counselor who helped me emotionally process what happened, and went to graduate school to become a mental health counselor. At the time of this writing, I was in my final semester of graduate school and an intern at a counseling agency that specializes in trauma, focusing on domestic violence. I've experienced and studied this topic for more than a decade. There's one more point I would like to address before beginning the story. I refer to people who lived through abuse as survivors because we are all alive. We literally lived to survive the abuse. This is a much more empowering term than victims. The victim mentality keeps people living in the mindset of being a victim of something that happened to them, while the survivor mentality helps people realize the strength they have that kept them alive. Some people actually are victims, though, and those are the ones that did not make it out alive. This is a very important distinction to make because using this term gives those fortunate to survive survivors a feeling of power. Early domestic violence resources called people victims, or worse yet, wife batterer victims. Intimate partner violence does not just happen to wives, it happens to people of all genders and relationship statuses. I'm a survivor. Anyone that has experienced abuse who is still alive is a survivor. Throughout this book, I will use the term survivor to refer to anyone that has experienced DV or IPV. As a community of people reading this book and people that care about survivors, I hope that we can help people make smart decisions. Share your thoughts and stories using #warning signs so we can grow together. Volume 1 Prologue. I originally wrote this story as one book, but there is so much emotional content and information about abuse to share that it felt easier to digest, broken up into 3 volumes. Volume 1 shows a story about how we met, fell in love, and began our relationship together. In some ways, it reads as a romantic comedy love story, as that is how it felt to me at the time. But looking deeper into it, one can see there were warning signs that he could be abusive even at the beginning. This is one of the main purposes of the story, and this volume in particular. Looking closely into what people say and how they act can illuminate signs of their character. By learning to identify these warning signs early on, we can hopefully avoid entering these relationships in the first place. Volume 2 shows the story of our marriage, how our relationship changed, and why I stayed with him. Volume 3 shows how I began to understand what was happening, started questioning my trust in him, and eventually left him. It can feel frustrating to the reader to see how long that takes, but it is what really happened, and it is common. It takes survivors an average of 7 times to actually leave their abusers. I hope you learn a lot from this story. There is a lot to take in, so take your time with it, and find ways that help you process what you are learning. Journal your thoughts or experiences. Talk about them with trusted support people. See a counselor or body healer. Draw, paint, create music, dance, or join the online community and share your thoughts and healing processes on social media with #warning-signs. Chapter 1. Beginning. When I turned 25, I found myself in a quarter-century life crisis. I heard all my life that to be successful, I needed to go to college, start a career, meet a man, wait 2 years to marry him, buy a house, and then bear children. I felt as though that was the only way to achieve happiness. Yet I had only accomplished step 1. I know, privileged, white, middle-class, able-bodied, heterosexual, cis women problems. But that was all I knew at the time. Society told me what I needed to focus on, and I listened. I earned a bachelor's degree in psychology, and after a short stint in the corporate workforce, I went to beauty school. I'd always dreamt of being a hairstylist and salon owner, so I set out to make that happen. Unfortunately, I finished beauty school in 2008 and began leasing a chair to run my own business in the beginning of the 2009 recession. All my clients or their partners were getting laid off. I had a steady stream of clients, but with their sudden drop in income, they all needed to push their appointments or stop getting their hair done altogether, which in turn dropped my income too. My dream of being a hairstylist was becoming futile. I was also struggling in the romance department. I went on a lot of dates, but every guy I met said he wasn't looking to settle down. I couldn't understand it. I was dating guys around my age. Didn't they want to follow the life plans of success and get married? Yet none were ready. They all said they wanted to travel and date several women, not marry one, and buy a house with her. In the summer of 2009, I began dating a friend whom I had a crush on since high school, Oscar. It was glorious. He was as sweet a boyfriend as he was a friend. Dating him was everything I had hoped it would be. But within a few weeks of dating, he told me he didn't want to get married, buy a house, or have kids. Sigh. He was like every other man I dated. He did, however, talk fondly of adoption. He was the first person our age I knew to ever broach the subject. He said there were enough people in this world, and we didn't need to selfishly add more just to propagate our own genes. Yet, he might want to raise a child one day. Might. He wasn't even sure of that idea. I, on the other hand, found the concept of adoption noble and selfless, and the possibility excited me. I loved it. I didn't love his hesitation, though. I eventually changed my list of goals to accommodate adoption. Step 1, college degree. Step 2, get married. Step 3, buy a house. Step 4, have one biological child. Step 5, adopt a child. However, he was against steps 2 through 4 due to society's implications of necessity. I was beginning to fall in love with him, yet I was confused. How would I continue my path of success with someone that didn't want to follow that path with me? I put that aside for the next few months while he helped me with the career part of my life plan. I had worked through high school, college, and beauty school, and then when I finished all my schooling, I still had to keep a second job just to pay my bills. I was exhausted, and my salon was getting quieter by the day, so I worked at a chain salon in the mall, hoping to make more money. But after a few months, I was still working 2 jobs, and I was still exhausted. I didn't want to give up on my dream, but I didn't have any more energy for it. Oscar and my dad separately suggested I get a job in the corporate world with benefits and a salary, so I would only work 40 hours a week. After years of 70-hour weeks, this concept was breathtaking. I smiled broadly. Yeah, I think I would like that. And then I paused. But how? All my experiences in restaurants, retail, and salons, my degrees in psychology. I already tried looking for psychology jobs, and they all require master's degrees. Oscar smiled back. Just start at the bottom like anywhere else. You were a host before you were a server, right? Apply for entry-level jobs at companies that sound interesting to you, and then work your way up until you find a career you like. I thought he was brilliant. I didn't know what jobs or companies I would like, but I did know I wanted to make sure I stayed in the Seattle area if I eventually got a promotion at headquarters. I grew up in the Seattle suburbs and went to college in a rural area of the state, and I hated both the suburbs and the farm town. I loved college, but the small-town doldrums and political climate bored me. I loved Seattle's thriving nightlife, progressive politics, and proximity to my family. I knew I could eventually get promotions and that it was possible I'd move for work one day, so I wanted to ensure when that happened, I could return home. I found an online list of corporations headquartered in the Northwest, and one by one, I went to their websites and applied for all their entry-level jobs. There weren't as many options as I had seen in the past since it was 2009 and the economy was still sinking. However, I wasn't picky, so I applied to nearly everything I saw, which amounted to around 200 jobs. I was eventually offered jobs at 2 companies, one a cell phone provider that would have hired me as a bill collector, and the other a travel company that would have hired me as a sales agent. The former was a short commute for home. The latter was in a city almost an hour away, which required me to move and make new friends. I couldn't see myself being happy as a bill collector, so I accepted the job as a travel sales agent. I found an adorable apartment in a historic building from the 1900s with a view of Mount Rainier, just a half-mile from my new office. I loved walking to work and it kept me in great shape. I was feeling and looking great and excited for what opportunities this new job would bring me. Step 1, college degree, check. Step 2, career, check. Step 3, marriage, uncheck. I would have easily married Oscar one day, but he didn't agree with marriage and wasn't ready to settle down. A week after I moved to the new city to start my new life, and just a few months after dating Oscar, I eventually conceded that I needed to break up with him. I told him, I'm falling in love with you, Oscar, but I can't be with you if you don't want the same things. The tears in his eyes mirrored mine, and he looked at me sweetly. I'm falling in love with you too, Kate, but I understand. We might as well end things now before it gets more difficult. Hearing his feelings for me summoned my personality trait that had been as equally helpful as harmful, my relentless perseverance. Once I settle on something or someone I want, I do everything I can to make it happen. I squeaked out a small voice and tried to find the courage to be persistent, yet strong enough to know when to walk away. Well, my aunt and uncle were together 10 years before they got married. Maybe one day, do you think you will change your mind? I can wait. He sighed and let out a small chuckle. I don't want to make you wait for me. Go with your instincts. We hugged, cried, and said goodbye. Ironically, he is now a married homeowner with a child, and my aunt and uncle are divorced. Funny how life changes. Chapter 1, Warning Signs. Welcome to your first warning signs section. This is only the first chapter, and at this point we have not met the other main character yet, so there are not any true warning signs. I want to acknowledge here how I was so firmly set on achieving my life goals.